Morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to ace GMAT Reading Comprehension. My name is Rajat Sadana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your co-host today. Along with me at Payal Tandon. Payal Tandon is the other co-founder of e-GMAT, and she's going to be our main host today. Also supporting us in this webinar, we have Sandeep. Sandeep is a GMAT strategy expert, and he's also going to be your co-host today. So there's a notion in the industry that to ace GMAT reading comprehension, you have to be a voracious reader, or you have to actually read up tons and tons of novels, books, etc., etc. In this webinar, we dispel this notion. In this webinar, we talk about a few key reading strategies which, if you apply effectively, can help improve your comprehension and consequently help you get that 90th percentile on GMAT RC. So this is a fairly application-focused webinar. And to make sure that you're actually able to apply those reading strategies and answer questions properly, we did send these two video lessons on main point your way. These were main point 1 and main point 2. If you've not gone through these video lessons, they are a part of your free trial. If you just log into e-GMAT.com and then scroll down to the reading comprehension module, should be able to go through them. Also, we have a few other upcoming free webinars. We have a free Quant workshop that is tomorrow. So think of the Quant workshop as a proctored Quant test. It'll do two things for you. One, it'll tell you what your current Quant score is based on the preparation level that you have till today. And then it'll also tell you where all should you spend time to get to your target Quant score. So this workshop's tomorrow. And then on next Saturday, we have a free webinar on how to pre-think assumptions, which is also what we call a core CR webinar. In this webinar, we talk about a strategy to pre-think assumptions and a strategy that applies on every argument type. That webinar is exactly a week from now, 6th of July at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Since this is a free webinar, we do ask a few leading questions. One of them is, when do you plan to take the test? The next webinar really is what is your target? The next question, sorry, really is, what is your target GMAT score? Now, based on the data that I have right now, what I really see is that the two big groups over here. One is those who have more than 60 days before their test. That's about 34% of you. And then those who have fewer than 15 days. So that's about a 20% of you. And then we have three almost equally sized groups with regards to when do people plan to take their test. Now, the nice thing about this is that regardless of when you plan to take the test, these reading strategies are so simple that if you apply them on 5,000 words of reading, that's about 8 articles, each about 700 words or so, you should be able to see a significant improvement in your GMAT reading comprehension performance. Now, with regards to your target GMAT score, what I really see is that the biggest group over here is those who are aiming for a score of 730 to 750. That's about 37%, 38%. 30% are in that 720, 710, 720 bracket. And then we have about 18% or so who are in that 760 or higher brackets. Actually, about 58% want to score 730 or higher. And then we have about 13% of you are in that 600 to 700 group. All right, with that, let's go right into the webinar pane. The screen will have or will be in the process of changing for you. Once the screen changes, what you should see is GMAT reading comprehension, and then you'd be able to see the agenda and as well as my photograph. I'm going to give you another 10 seconds for the screen to settle down. There's essentially three parts of this webinar. In the first part, I'm going to do a brief introduction to e-GMAT. That's going to last about 15 minutes from now. In the second part, we're going to go right into the core of the webinar. And then when Payal would take over, and she'll talk about these reading strategies, and she'll illustrate how they improve comprehension and consequently how they improve your performance in GMAT RC. And then in the third part of the webinar, we'll have an open-ended Q&A to answer any questions that have not been responded to overall since then in the second part of the webinar, essentially. So earlier on, I asked this question, which is, what's your target GMAT score? And about 60% of you said you want to get to a score of 730 or higher. While that may be the case, statistically, only 6% of the people get to a score of 720 or higher, and this is despite the fact that median scores at top B schools continue to go up, and this is data from 2018. So what is it that people who actually get to those scores do? A good percentage of them use e-GMAT. Why do we say that? When you look at the key stats on major forums, one is the number of verified reviews, and the second is the number of success stories posted over the last 12 months on GMAT Club Share, GMAT Experience Forum. What you're going to find is that more verified reviews are posted for e-GMAT than are posted for each of for all of the other major prep companies combined. Similarly, more success stories mention e-GMAT than do mention all of these other prep companies combined. So what makes e-GMAT is more successful? I think if there's one reason that makes e-GMAT is more successful, it is the architecture of the learning that we provide, or what we call as our approach to your GMAT preparation. When you think about the architectures of learning, there are essentially two architectures of learning that exist today. One is what we call as the classical book-based architecture, and the other is the private tutoring-based architecture. Now, when you look at all the other online courses over there, even though they provide audio-visual instruction, even though they essentially have quizzes, etc., the core architecture that they follow is what we call as the book-based architecture. And when you map e-GMAT to one of these two architectures, what you're going to find is that e-GMAT's built a lot more around this private tutoring-based architecture. So to understand what's the difference between these two architectures and why is it that the private tutoring-based architecture lends to a much higher success rate, let's kind of see how do you ace the GMAT. So to ace the GMAT is the path that you would really do. First of all, you're going to create a path towards your goal. Depending on what your strengths and weaknesses are, depending on what your starting scores are, you're going to create a personalized study plan and a personalized execution strategy towards that 720 or higher score. Now, based on your strengths, based on your weaknesses, you're then going to learn the concepts that you need to learn. Now, merely learning concepts isn't enough. You also need to know how to apply those concepts. And then you've got to get so good at applying those concepts that you attain a level of mastery that puts you in that top, 6, top 3, top 1 percentile of students overall. So let's see how a book-based approach, tackles this problem. A book-based approach is all about autonomy, which means that when you study using books, you get a couple of study plans, which is one is a Quant, while others a verbal focused study plan, and you've got to use one of those two study plans. Then you start learning concepts. Now, books really do a good job at teaching you concepts. The only problem is when 1,000 people go through a certain chapter in a book, they learn to 1,000 different degrees, and books, by their very static nature, don't give you feedback as to how well you've learned. So that burden of validation as to whether you've learned the concept well enough is completely on the student. Similarly, one area where books don't do as good a job is teaching you how to apply those concepts. They teach you concepts that tell you what's right versus what is wrong. What they don't really tell you is, hey, when you see a problem, how do you figure out what's right versus what is wrong? What do you need to do in step 1? What do you need to do in step 2? And if you make a mistake, how should we evaluate where you made a mistake? As a result, people who master application while studying using books solve hundreds and hundreds of questions, and a few of you do. Others actually have to go through this process multiple times. And when it comes to evaluation of mastery, a book-based approach usually relies on taking mock tests when it comes to evaluation of mastery, and the onus of evaluation of your attempt is completely on the student. Private tutoring-based architecture works very differently. When you work with a good private tutor, a good private tutor would spend a couple of hours evaluating your strengths and weaknesses and then creating a personalized study plan for you. Then a good private tutor would teach you concepts, and while teaching you concepts, a good private tutor will give you feedback that's personalized to you. then a private tutor will tell you how you will teach you how to apply those concepts. So when approaching a problem after learning a concept, what do you need to do in step 1, what do you need to do in step 2, step 3, and so on and so forth. And then while you're solving questions, a good private tutor will evaluate your performance such that when you attain a level of mastery that puts you in the top 6, top 4, top 1 percentile, a good private tutor would then make you move from one particular topic to the other. So what's the difference between these two approaches? While you're learning the same content, while you're learning the same concepts, the extent of personalization, the amount of feedback that is there is much higher in that private tutor-based approach. And it's fairly easy to see why that approach leads to much higher score improvement. So let's see, why is it that we say that most of the other courses are based around this book-based approach, whereas e-GMAT's built around this private tutoring-based architecture, and tutoring should have the N over there. So let's start with the first step, defining that path towards your goal. We'll take an example of a student who starts at a score of 600, wants to get to that 720 score. So how do you create that personalized study plan? You first quantify what your starting abilities are. GMAT's a test of abilities, and essentially GMAT quantifies quantitatively tests 5 different abilities. So first you need to define those starting abilities, then you need to define milestones for each of those 5 abilities, and then you need to personalize your learning so that you get to that 720, 740, 760 score. So how do you define your starting abilities? You take a sigma x mock. What is a sigma x mock? It's a mock which is designed by e-GMAT that has independent ability engines. It gives you your ability scores in SCCR and RC, as well as arithmetic and algebra. It's the world's only mock test that has independent ability engines that gives you these scores. Then you need to define those milestones. You need to figure out what's the best way for you to get to that 720 score. And we've built an AI-driven tool that allows each one of you to create those milestones. How does this tool work? It consumes the information from a sigma x mock, the same ability scores, and creates a personalized study plan. Let's see how it does that. It takes in your current quant and verbal scores, and then it provides a recommended quant and verbal score if you want to get to that 720 score. Remember, the score over here is a 720. If it were a 760, it will be a different set of recommendations. It then tells you how are you going to get to that Q50 and how would you get to that V38 depending on your starting abilities in arithmetic, algebra, SCCR, and RC. And all this is done in GMAT Planner. And then based on your starting abilities and ending abilities, it helps create a personalized study plan. So in Quant, you go from a 59th percentile to an 83rd percentile, and in algebra you go from a 39th to an 83rd percentile. And the same thing on the verbal side of things. It then creates a day-by-day study plan where it says, hey, these are your starting abilities, these are your ending abilities, this is the amount of time that you need to put in, and that's an estimated effort that is done based on the data that we have from over 40,000 paying students. So when you do this, your GMAT preparation is actually divided into 5 trackable milestones where you're going from a certain starting score in SC to a certain target score in SC, and same thing in CR, RC, as well as on the quant side of things. And then it also helps create a day-by-day study plan based on the amount of time that you're going to put in during a weekday versus a weekend. And then you can adjust that, and it tells you how many hours you need to put in on each and every day, and which section do you need to study during that time. So why did we spend 1,000 hours building this utility? So that each one of you can create your personalized study plan in 7 minutes or fewer. The next thing that a private tutoring-based architecture does after actually creating a study plan is to really teach you concepts, and e-GMAT's architecture is designed to really teach you concepts and give you feedback that's personalized to you. Let's take a look at a subject verb module in our SC course. What you really see over here is the first 4 lessons are concepts. You see the video icon over here. See the video icon over here. These are concepts. Now each one of these concepts gives you feedback that's personalized to you. It's about your performance and how well you've learned those concepts. Now compare this to another popular course, probably a course which is almost as old as the GMAT course by Magoosh. What you're going to find is that hey, subject verb module, not as comprehensive first of all, but again, it is just a bunch of lessons with no feedback incorporated over here. Essentially, this seems like an audio-visual book. The next piece is, how do you teach application of concepts? Now, private tutor will tell you what you need to do in step 1, what you need to do in step 2, what you need to do in step 3. And in the e-GMAT course, we built an entity called an application file in which we tell you exactly that. Now, once we teach you how to apply the concepts, we then tell you how to evaluate you on your ability to apply those concepts. And then we actually make you apply those concepts on official questions as well. And this is how every module, whether it's a quant module or a verbal module, is architected in the e-GMAT course. Now again, compare this with a Magoosh offering. What you're going to find is there's just one quiz with 5 questions, which in this quiz is common not just to subject verb, but also to auxiliary verbs and pronouns. And again, there's no scoring over here. Again, the intent is just to give you practice, but not to give you feedback. The next step is evaluation of mastery. Remember, while teaching how to apply concepts, a private tutor constantly evaluates your ability to apply concepts to see whether you hit that 90th percentile or not. And to do that, we've actually built a platform called Scholarium, and it's actually the world's highest rated assessment platform. And it has what we call as ability quizzes. You take an ability quiz, you get a percentile score. And not only that, it gives the analytics to tell you where you're faltering. So in this case, this particular student clearly needs to spend a lot of energy on comparisons if he or she wants to improve her SC ability to the 90th percentile. So you can really see how and why we say that most of the other courses are built around this book-based approach, whereas e-GMAT is built around this private tutoring-based architecture. Now, who's created some of this content? Some of GMAT Lab's top-rated instructors have created this content. Instructors who've actually been rated among those top 5 out of the 300-odd instructors listed on GMAT Lab. And it's no surprise that these instructors have more reviews than do instructors from other major prep companies. So while only 6% of the people get to those 720 or higher scores, you can really see why a good percentage of them use e-GMAT. Now, not only are e-GMAT students more successful, e-GMAT courses offer some of the best guarantees overall. This is, our verbal course, our verbal live course that is starting next week, and we offer the world's highest guarantee with this. We offer an up to +7 point guarantee with our GMAT Live Prep on the verbal side of things. What it really means is that, hey, this guarantee, if you have a V30, we can guarantee up to a V35, V36. This guarantee goes all the way up to the 90th percentile, or what we call as a V44. There's no other course that offers up to a 7-point guarantee or offers a guarantee up to 90th percentile on GMAT Verbal. Similarly, on the Quant side of things, we're also starting a batch starting with Quant from 6th of July. And again, it has up to a 7-point score improvement guarantee. And this guarantee goes all the way up to Q50. And this is a pure guarantee. What it really means is that we don't require that you take the GMAT at least 2 times after taking the course. Unlike most of the prep companies, if you've taken the GMAT once, you have an official score, you take GMAT Live Prep, you don't improve, we refund your money. With that, I've come to the end of my introduction.
Thank you, Rajat, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Reading Comprehension webinar. Let's just make sure that all of you can hear me loud and clear. Please press yes if you can hear me clearly. All right, I think everyone can. Sounds good. Okay. All right, so let's get started here. Now, before I go into talking about how to ace reading comprehension, I will need to understand what your comfort level in reading comprehension is. So for that, I'm going to be asking you a few questions. So let's start with this one. Do you enjoy reading comprehension? By that, what I mean is that according to your study plan, let's say from next week onwards, you have to start preparing for reading comprehension. How many of you get excited by the prospect of that? I see that majority of you, about 70% of the class, does not enjoy reading comprehension. Okay, now let's understand why is it that you don't enjoy reading comprehension. And for that, I'm going to be asking you um, a, an open-ended question in which I just want you to write down the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about RC. And that first thing obviously will be something that you don't appreciate or you find annoying about RC, or you feel that this thing is getting in the way of my doing well in RC. Let's get some more responses here. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about RC? I see a number of you writing boring. I see that you're talking about concentration and that it's time consuming, it's long text, it's convoluted way of saying simple things. All right. Answer choices are confusing, obscure writing styles, long and tedious, focus on many points and seeing what is important, and that's a challenge for you. Lengthy paragraphs. Okay, so what I see is that it's the sheer length of the text, the amount of text that you see in a reading comprehension passage that bogs you down, that makes you feel that, okay, RC is not something that I enjoy. So, all right. Now let me ask you one question again. Another question here. How many of you have experienced this scenario? And let me explain the scenario here to you. You read a passage, and as you are reading the passage, you feel as if you are in control of the passage. You feel as if you have understood what the author is trying to say. But then when you come to the the question and the answer choices, you are absolutely stumped by what by the question itself. So how many of you have experienced that scenario? Almost all of you have. Okay. All right. Now let me put some more concrete reasons behind you're not doing well in RC. And I'm going to be asking you, so read through the choices and tell me which one do you associate with the most. You may associate with almost all, but which one do you associate with the most as the reason behind not doing well in RC? And let me get rid of the polls here. Yeah, there you go. All right, let's get a few more responses here. All right, I'm going to broadcast the results now. So majority of you feel that you don't have enough time and your reading speed is slow, and that's the primary reason for not doing well in RC. Then answer choices are very close, is pretty close to the first choice here. And then you have passages are too complex and not enough retention, almost at the same level. So it's really you feel that there is a lot of text to read, and that's the reason why you feel that your reading speed is not optimum. There's so much text to read and understand that you are not, that you don't feel that you can do well on RC. Okay, now let's switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to ask you this question. What is the difference between an active reader and a passive reader? What do you think is the difference between an active reader and a passive reader? If you don't know, that's okay. I'll explain the difference in a bit. So let's read through some of the responses. Active asks themselves questions about the reading. Active one, okay, absolutely right. Active reader is the one who contemplates what will come next. Absolutely right. Active is the one who reads regularly. Not exactly. Active reader connects the sentences with each other and with the passage. Absolutely right. Active readers are more focused. Absolutely right. About interest in reading, not so much. Okay, so active reader is a person, as a number of you have said, who is absolutely engaged in the passage. okay, who is able to make connections amongst the different parts of the passage, okay, who wants to understand what the author is trying to say, who's absolutely committed to the passage, okay. Now, tell me, if you were an active reader of the passage, would you be able to do well in RC? If you are an active reader, would you be able to do well in RC? Absolutely. And that is the difference between a person who aces RC and the one who struggles with it. If you are an active reader, you will definitely be able to do well in RC. If you are a passive reader, you can just forget about RC. Okay. So what we're going to do in this session is we are going to help you ace reading comprehension. How? We're going to teach you how is it that you can get the maximum from the passage. Okay. How is it that you can become an active reader? And to do that, I'm going to introduce you to reading strategies. I'm going to demonstrate these reading strategies through two small passages. Okay, so the first part of this session will be focused on how is it that you can become an active reader. Now that you are an active reader, I will teach you how do you use the information that you extract from the passage to be able to answer the questions that you are posed, right? So I'm going to demonstrate that through a main point question and through an inference question, okay? So one quick check that I want to make sure that everyone understands is that I am not going to be solving long passages in this session. The goal over here is to teach you how is it that you can become an active reader. So for that, we have two small passages, but you'll absolutely get the idea about how is it that you can become an active reader. Okay, so I just want to make sure that you all set your expectations right. Okay, towards the end, I'm going to provide you with a study plan that you can follow to master RC. Okay, so let's talk about the reading strategies now. Now, RC begins with, as you prepare for RC, one thing that you have to keep in mind is that you have to change your attitude. Okay, your journey to acing GMAT RC starts with having that right attitude towards RC. Almost all of you here are scared of GMAT RC. You consider it to be a nemesis, that one thing that stops you from getting that V40 or V44 score. Okay. If you really want to get to that percentile level in verbal, then you have to change this attitude. Okay. By that, what I mean is that you have to feel, you have to have that level of confidence that yes, you can master RC. RC is not something which is undefeatable. No, you can definitely master RC. In fact, reading comprehension is one of the easiest sections in verbal to master. Why? Because there aren't that many concepts to actually learn or memorize. All you have to do is get that sense of reading the right way. Okay. So first of all, change that attitude. How many of you now feel, I know you haven't seen the reading strategies yet, but I want you to get that positive outlook towards RC. Okay, so click on yes if you promise me that you will have that positive attitude towards RC. Good, thank you. All right, so now let's talk about the first strategy. The first strategy is you need to get immersed in the passage, and this strategy goes hand in hand with that positive attitude. And the first thing that most of you said when I asked you about what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about RC was the word boring. Okay, I want you to remove that word from your dictionary as it pertains to your attitude towards RC. Don't think of reading comprehension as a boring thing. Think about it as an opportunity to learn so much. I mean, RC passages are brilliantly written passages. Okay, there is information in there which the way connections are made, those connections are very logical. Okay, think about that opportunity, those 5 to 10 minute opportunity that you have in while reading an RC passage as an opportunity to learn something about, again, to actually learn how logical connections are made. Think about it in this manner. Again, I'm giving you some alternate ways to to get that positive outlook towards RC. Think about it. If the author has spent so much effort in writing the passage, the least that you can do is read the passage in the right manner. Okay. Third thing that you can do is think about yourself being in a conversation with the author. Okay, when you are conversing with a colleague or with a friend, you are always trying to understand what your colleague is talking about, what the other person is talking about. You're processing that information and then you are presenting your viewpoint, right? So while you're reading an RC passage, obviously it's a one-way communication because the author has presented his stuff, right? So you can, but still you can be in that conversation with the author wherein you read certain part of the passage, you understand that passage, and then you think about, okay, why has the author written that? Why are you saying this? What do you mean when you say that, right? Get in that mode of questioning the author with an intent to understand what the author is trying to say. Okay, the moment you remove that word boring from your dictionary with regards to RC, and the moment you start to feel that connection with the author, all right, can you guys hear me now? Yes, no? All right, sorry about that. For some reason, I wasn't able to do anything in Adobe Connect, so I had to log back in. All right, so where were we when this thing got stuck? What were we talking about? Connect with the author. Okay, thank you. So I asked you guys a question that does it, if you think about the passage in the manner that I just explained to you, do you believe that you can do well in RC? I mean, first of all, how many of you can start thinking about RC in this manner? Good. I'm glad to see that. Okay. So again, remove the word boring. Thank you very much for reminding me about that. Connect with the author. Absolutely right. And that is going to help you improve your attitude towards RC. Now, once you do this, beyond that, things are absolutely easy. So RC is all about getting that attitude right. Okay. So once you get your attitude right, now we go into the reading strategies. Okay. Now, one thing that I do want to tell you, that I want to make sure that you all understand, is The reading strategies, as I explained to you, you would feel that, so as I explained the reading strategies to you, you may feel that, oh my God, how am I going to do this in the timed nature of the test? Okay, given that the test is actually timed. Believe me, you will be able to do that. Okay, so remove the aspect of timing on the side. We will talk about that after I explain to you what these reading strategies are, after I demonstrate to you the impact of applying these reading strategies. Then we'll talk about the timing part of it. Okay, but for now, remove that timing aspect completely out of your head. Okay, so let's talk about the first reading strategies. The first one is understand the sentence structure. Okay, now okay, actually, let me make one more comment here. The questions that I ask you, please put the answers to those questions in the short answer poll. Okay, the questions that you ask us, you can put those questions in the Q&A pod. Okay. All right. So the first reading strategy, understand the sentence structure. Now, the sentences in a reading comprehension passage are typically long, they're typically complex, they are typically loaded with pretty difficult vocabulary, with not difficult vocabulary words, but then again decent difficulty level of words. Okay, so in order for you to be able to get everything from the sentence, you need to break it down into smaller parts. Okay, and that is what I mean by when I say understand sentence structure. You have a long sentence, don't consider the sentence as a building block of an RC passage. Okay, think about a sentence as simply a group of ideas that have been presented together. So think about an idea as a building block, which means you need to break the sentence down into its smaller chunks in order to understand what the author is trying to communicate through that sentence. Okay, so that's about sentence structure. The second thing is predict the thoughts through keywords. Okay, what do I mean by that? Let's say the author has made a positive statement and then the author says, having said that. Now, before you read what comes after having said that, you pause and you think about what the author could be talking about. So tell me, the author made a positive statement about something and then he says, having said that. So what do you think the author is going to say next? Type in the short answer poll. He's going to present a contrasting thought. Absolutely right. He's going to introduce a negative point. Absolutely right. Okay, so why is it that you should be pausing? You may ask me, okay, why do I need to pause? Because the author has already presented the entire sentence. Why can't I read in the same flow? The reason for that is when you pause and when you think about what the author could say next based on the keywords that are present in the sentence, what you're doing is you are, before reading itself, you are preparing your mind to absorb what's going to come next. Okay, if you already know that the author is going to say something counter to what he has already presented, the author is going to give something which is not positive, that means you are already prepared to accept what the author is saying next. So now your comprehension of that part of the passage is going to be very solid. How many of you understand this? How many of you understand why pausing on these keywords, why hinging on these keywords is going to be a positive influence on your comprehension? Good, very nice. All right, now let's look at the last one. Summarize and predict what's next. Now, what is the difference between points 2 and 3? Really, in point number 2, what you're doing is you are hinging on the keywords. Okay. In point number 3, what you're doing is you're reading a bunch of information, and as soon as you feel that there is that overload of information, you pause. Okay, you pause and you summarize whatever you have read in your own words. Okay, What that does is that really helps you assimilate whatever you have read till that point in time. And by converting what the author has said in your own words, by summarizing that, you really get that level of understanding, which is not possible if you are simply reading and reading whatever the author is saying. Okay, so really summarizing and predicting what's next helps you to assimilate things a lot better before you start to put new stuff in your mind. Okay, now when should you summarize? It all depends upon you. You can summarize the logical pause points for summarizing are definitely the paragraphs, right? Summarize after paragraph 1, summarize after paragraph 2, and whatnot. But if you, whenever you are reading in within a paragraph, let's say you've read the first 2 sentences, when you come to the third sentence, if you feel that you are missing out, you start reading the third sentence, and if you feel that it's just too much of information, you just pause at that point. Okay, think about it in this manner. As you are reading, you will get clues of how is it that you should be reading, when is it that you should be pausing. Okay, and that's the beauty of being an active reader. That's what an active reader does. Okay, if you read the first 2 sentences, when you're reading the third sentence, you're still you're feeling that, okay, my brain is not able to accept it, pause. That's a clue for you. Okay, and that is what strategy number 3 is all about. So if you think about it, strategy number 1 is on a sentence level. Okay, how do you read a sentence? Okay, strategy number 2 is within a paragraph. Okay, and strategy number 3 is within a paragraph as well as among the paragraphs. So this is how these are the 3 key reading strategies that you need to follow. Okay, now here comes the most important thing about these reading strategies, that you need to apply these slowly. Okay, I want you to write this word slowly on your scratch pad. When you're doing RC, what I would recommend is put this word slowly everywhere wherever you are sitting down to read reading comprehension, to prepare for reading comprehension, because this needs to be a constant reminder to you when you're preparing for reading comprehension, because your intuitive habit right now is your regular mode of operation right now is to read fast. Okay, that has to change. You need to read slowly. You need to apply these reading strategies slowly, because if you don't apply these things slowly, then you are not going to be able to improve your comprehension. Is this point clear? So there are 2 very high level things that I'm telling you. Remove the word boring from your dictionary as it pertains to reading comprehension, and add the word slowly. Okay, those are 2 very big attitude changing things for you. All right, so now apart from these strategies, there are these tactical strategies that are really there to make your life easier. The first one is you shorten the technical terms. Now, many a times you're going to be, more often than not, you're going to be reading terms that you are not familiar with. These are technical terms. So instead of letting those technical terms act as a speed bump, just make sure that you shorten those technical terms so that these terms don't get in the way of your comprehension. Okay, and this is something which I'm going to demonstrate to you in the passages that we see. Okay, all right, so now let's apply these strategies slowly to our first passage. Now what I'm going to do now is give you a passage, and I want all of you to first click on no over here in this poll. And why I'm asking you to click on no is that as soon as you are done reading the passage, I want you guys to change your response to yes. That way, when about 60% of the class is done reading the passage, I'm going to show you the question. Okay. Now, as you're reading the passage, I also want you to take down notes in your scratch pad. Okay. And then after you're done reading the passage, I want you to write down a summary of your notes over here. Okay. So I'm going to show this. So I'm going to end this poll right now. And when 60% of you have clicked on yes, I'm going to reopen this poll so that you can put in your notes. But as you're reading your passage, take down notes in your scratch pad. Okay, so let's get going. So take your time. Time is not an issue here. Go ahead. All right, let's get everyone to select the correct answer. Last few seconds, I still see about 60 people who have not put in their responses. So last few seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So about 50% of the class selected choice D as the correct answer. And then the next two popular choices were choices B and C, about 20% each. And then choice A, very few people have selected. So we'll come back to this poll. I'll take a look at your notes as well. Let me first ask you, how was this passage? How many of you found the passage to be difficult? Click on yes if you found the passage to be difficult. Okay, what made this passage difficult? About 70% of you felt that the passage was difficult, but what made this passage difficult? Lots of information, technical words, vocabulary, jargons, technical jargons. Okay. Now, how many of you were able to apply the strategies that we spoke about? Okay, about 70%. And what strategies in specific were you able to apply? Reading slowly, absolutely, very nice. Skip the technical terms, okay. Instead of skipping, it's really abbreviating, shortening the technical terms. So slow reading, connect with the author, okay, where pause and absorb, good. I see slowly didn't work for me, one of you has said, okay. Good, very nice. So how many of you felt that by reading slowly, you had a better control of the passage? How many of you felt that? Good. All right. Now, again, I didn't expect magic to happen, right? I've just told you about these strategies. It is going to take some time for these strategies to sink in, for these strategies to become an intuitive process for you, okay? But the good thing is, the positive thing is that you are able to apply it, okay? And you are seeing some benefit out of it, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you how I apply these strategies. And then what that would do is, as you're reading as you're following through my application of these strategies, I want you to make clear notes about what is it that I did that you didn't do, because that is how you're going to learn how to read slowly, how to apply these strategies. Okay. And while I'm reading the passage, I'm going to be asking you lots of questions. So keep your mouse ready and your keyboard ready for you to write down those responses. Let's start. Bordering on the extreme, one definition of ethnocentrism. Now, I read this part and then I actually pause over here. Why? Because I want to first understand what the author is saying in this first part of the sentence. Okay. Bordering on the extreme, one definition of ethnocentrism. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten this technical term, ethnocentrism, as EC. How many of you were familiar with this term ethnocentrism before you looked at this passage? Not many of us, yes. So let's shorten this up as EC. How many of you did abbreviate this term? Okay. So my feedback to you is you need to start abbreviating technical terms. Okay. EC is the abbreviation here. All right. Bordering on the extreme, one definition of ethnocentrism. Now, what do you think borders on the extreme? Is it one definition or is it ethnocentrism? What borders on the extreme? It is the definition. Absolutely right. It's the definition of EC. Okay. It's not ethnocentrism. It's not EC that borders on the extreme. It's that one definition of EC that borders on the extreme. Good. Now, my next question to you is, what does bordering on the extreme mean? It is an extreme definition. It's an exaggerated definition. Absolutely right. It's an exaggerated definition. There are more than one definitions. Absolutely. There are more than one definitions, but the one definition that the author is talking about is an exaggerated definition. Absolutely right. Okay. How many of you were able to understand that this definition that the author is talking about is exaggerated? About half of the class. Okay. So that's one feedback point. You have to pay attention to such contextual phrases or such contextual pieces of information in the passage. Okay, now let's read further. So the author has presented one definition. By the way, this definition is exaggerated. Okay, what is this definition about? This definition is about ethnocentrism. Let's read further. This definition, one definition of EC considers it. What does it refer to in this case? What does it refer to in this case? Considers what? Considers EC. Absolutely right. Considers EC a schematic in-group, out-group differentiation in which. Now, I'm going to pause here. Why? Because after in which, what am I going to see? Why am I pausing here? Why am I pausing at this point? What am I going to see after in which? Some more details, right? I'm going to see some more details after in which. So let me pause at this point and understand what I have read till this point. Absolutely right. So one definition of EC considers EC a schematic in-group, out-group differentiation. How many of you know the meaning of the word schematic? We don't need to worry about it at all. Okay. Why? Because all we can say, what we can do is we can convert this word into saying some kind of in-group, out-group differentiation. Okay. So my feedback to you is that if you come across a word that you don't understand the meaning of, try replacing that with pronouns such as some kind of differentiation. That's absolutely fine. Okay. Don't let that word bog you down. That's my feedback to you. Okay. So some kind of differentiation. And by the way, in-group, out-group differentiation, what do you make of that? What do you make of the in-group, out-group differentiation? Difference between what? Differentiation between people who are in the group versus people who are outside the group. Absolutely. Okay, inside the group and outside the group. Okay. All right, so now let's read further. So one definition that considers it some kind of differentiation in which, now this in which is going to explain what? Based on the sentence structure, what is this description going to explain? The differentiation. This description is going to explain this in-group, out-group differentiation. Absolutely right. So let's start reading that. In which internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, loyalty, and devotion to the in-group. And look at this here. This is how the author makes interconnections. He is talking about in differentiation between the in-group and the out-group. And now he's saying that, okay, what is this differentiation in which these things to the in-group are correlated with something else towards the out-group. Okay. Now, let's just focus on this part here. What are these internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, loyalty, and devotion? What are you going to do to these terms here? How will you understand these terms? How many of you are going to abbreviate these terms as IC, RP, S, L, and D? How many of you will abbreviate these terms? Good. I'm glad that majority of you will not abbreviate it, because see, these are not technical terms. These are not technical terms. These terms need to be summarized. Okay. EC is a technical term, but internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, loyalty, and devotion, these terms need to be summarized, not abbreviated. Okay. Combining is the right thing. Okay. Don't ignore these terms, not at all. Don't skim them over, not at all. How can you summarize these 5 terms? Internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, loyalty, and devotion. Name them good things. Absolutely right. Some characteristics. No, something more positive. Absolutely. Absolutely. Love for each other. Love for people who are in the group. Positive emotions towards people who are in your group. Absolutely right. Okay. So the key thing over here is that you should not be, don't consider these 5 terms to be details. No, don't skim them over. You need to summarize them and then move on. Okay, so what this is saying is that positive emotions or love for your own people are correlated, are linked with what? With a state of hostility towards the out groups. Okay, so the in-group out-group differentiation is what? Is that love for your own people is linked with a state of hostility towards outside groups, with hatred towards outside group. That is what this extreme definition of ethnocentrism is. Okay, now we read further. Which. Now what is the word which going to describe here? What is this word which going to describe? The outgroups. Absolutely right. It's going to describe the outgroups, which are often perceived as subhuman and or incorporation of evil. So these outgroups are considered as subhuman. Okay, that's what he's saying. So overall, what have we read? What this passage is saying is, he's presenting one definition of EC. Okay, it indicates that the definition is a bit exaggerated. According to the definition, these two are linked. Love for your own people is linked with hatred towards outside people. Okay, now if you think about it, now let me ask you one more question here. Let me get the poll. I want you to tell me which of these items you were not able to understand from the passage when you read the passage on your own. Which of these were you not able to understand? Or were you not able to arrive at? Let's get some more responses here. I have about 150 people. 50 responses. Let's get a few more. Because this is a key point. This is the feedback that you need to take from this exercise. All right, I have about 70 responses. Half of the class has responded here. Let's look at this. So number 1 presents one definition of EC. Almost everyone was able to get. Now see, this is something that's given in the passage. It's explicitly stated that there is this one definition of EC. Okay. Oh, what about none as an option? That's a good one. Let me do this. Let me ask. That's a very good point. Let me edit this and I'll say none. All right. Now let's go ahead and get you to. Okay. I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so about 23% of the class was able to get everything. That's really good. Now let's see. Number 1, not many of you skipped this point, which is good. And again, this thing is explicitly stated in the passage. Let's take a look at number 2. Indicates that the definition is a bit exaggerated. About half of the class was not able to understand that. Now, if you think about it, this thing is really an inference that you need to draw. Okay. Now, many a times people think that they need to draw inferences only for questions that require you to find an inference. Now that's a question type inference, right? But when you're reading the passage, you need to be able to continually draw inferences from the information that the author presents. Okay, and that's why this is a skill that you need to develop. How do you infer information? How do you understand what the author is trying to say? Okay, in this case, we didn't do anything going out of our way. All we were doing was just trying to get in the head of the author to understand what he's trying to say. Okay, and that's a skill but we actually drew this inference as we were reading the passage. Okay. Now let's take a look at the last one. The last one, per the definition following are correlated, about 40% of the class was not able to do that. Okay. Now this is something which you should be able to do if you are summarizing the information properly. Okay, because all we did over here was read what the author is saying and we summarized it in our own words. Okay. So now that we have gone through this passage, tell me, was it really difficult? The way I read the passage and the way we together I asked you questions and you responded to those questions. What was so difficult about it? It wasn't that difficult at all, right? The key thing is, think about the mechanism that we followed here. I was asking you questions and you were responding to those questions. That's the same drill that you need to do when you are interacting with the passage on your own. Just take me out of the picture. You ask the questions and you respond to those questions on your own. Is this something that you can do? Yes or no? Good. Okay, I have some questions in the Q&A part. Should we simultaneously take notes while reading the passage? Yes, absolutely. Note taking is something which is very personal, okay? It really varies from a person to person how he or she takes notes. But what I would say is, whenever I am reading a passage, I'm always taking down notes. I'm always writing down notes at a very high level. And again, when you're starting off learning this process, you will write down lots and lots of notes. It's absolutely fine to do that. But slowly, what you're going to think of, what you are going to start doing is, slowly it's going to become absolutely intuitive for you. Okay? But still, you are given a scratch pad for the very purpose that you need to take down notes. Okay, now whether it's RC passage, whether it's CR passage, it doesn't matter. Okay, let's take up another question. But that takes too much time. Doesn't this process take a lot of time, considering this is only a small passage? Remember what I told you guys? I see about 5 questions here, and all those 5 questions are about taking time. You need to forget about time. Okay, tell me one thing. First of all, tell me, if you read the passage in this way, do you have the confidence that you can answer questions correctly? Yes or no? Yes. Now tell me one thing. If you read this passage fast, do you think you will be able to answer questions correctly? Now, do you have your answer? What is important? What is important for the test? To just go through the passages for the sake of going through it because the passage is given to you, or to be able to answer questions correctly? What is important for the test? My question is, what is important for you to do well on the GMAT? To be able to answer questions correctly, or to go through the passages real quickly? To answer correctly, right? Now, yes, you're absolutely right. When you are starting off with this process, when you're starting to learn the process, you are going to take time. I never said that this is going to come easy. I never said that you're going to be able to solve the first passage within the time constraints of the test. No, I gave you all the time to answer this, to read this passage. Why? Because right now you are learning the process. Okay, but as you do this on 10 passages, for some of you it may take up to 20 passages. As you do this, this is going to become a second nature to you. The process is going to sink in. You will develop the skills that are required. And that's when you're going to see that you can actually answer questions in a very short duration, in a very short amount of time. Okay, but for you to be able to even get to that level, you have to take that timing thing out of your head. You need to have that confidence that you are building this skill, and finally this skill is going to help you in answering. When you're learning it, the skill is going to help you answer the questions correctly, and finally when you have mastered the skill, you will be able to answer questions correctly even under the timed constraints of the test. And I'm going to share certain success stories with you of people who have done that, people who have been in your shoes. Okay, but right now, just have that level of confidence in yourself and in the process. Okay. Okay, I have a question. I've tried this in a practice test and I ended up missing 5 to 6 questions in the end, which dropped my score massively. Shivangi, you cannot just simply try this process out in a practice test till the time you have not mastered the process. That's a very, very big mistake that you're doing. Right? There is no point in you applying this process in a mock test or in a practice test without you gaining that level of mastery. Okay, you are actually ruining your mock test. Will converting the sentences into your own language increase the effectiveness of learning? Absolutely, yes, it will. And in this approach, do we need to understand each and every sentence? You have to understand each and every sentence. For that matter, you have to understand each and every part of the sentence. Remember what I said? Sentence is not the building block. You need to consider the idea in the sentence to be the building block of your RC passage. So yes, you need to be able to understand that. Okay. Okay. Now let's go through the questions. The first, and let me bring back the poll here. To criticize a concept that encourages hostility. Now there is no criticism at all. Okay. The author is simply presenting a definition of EC. He's not criticizing anything. He's saying that this definition borders on the extreme, but he's not criticizing EC specifically. So this thing is not correct. Let's take a look at choice B, to evaluate the concept of ethnocentrism and about, actually no, this is not the right poll. Sorry about that. Let me get the poll here. Okay, choice B, about 20% of the class selected, right? So to evaluate, now what does it mean to evaluate? What do you do when you evaluate? You analyze, yes. You reread and pause, no. You list positives and negatives, pros and cons, absolutely right. You list out positives and negatives. So to evaluate the concept of ethnocentrism while enlisting its various features. So first of all, there is no evaluation of ethnocentrism, okay? Now, while enlisting its various features, now for the 24 of you who selected choice B, tell me if this is what was going on in your mind when you selected choice B. Okay, and let me articulate that first. What you thought was that there are certain positive views and negative views. The positives about so what was that thing? Internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, those are positive aspects. And then the hatred, hostility is the negative aspect. And that's why there is a positive and a negative, and thus evaluate is the correct answer. How many of you felt that way for those of you who selected choice B? Okay. Now what you did over here was you simply looked at the passage from its surface. You didn't go deep into what those positive terms were talking about. Okay, and that's why you got this question wrong. Okay, so you simply skimmed at the surface. Now, while enlisting its various features, how many of you felt that, okay, these internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, these are various features? How many of you felt that way when you selected choice B? Quite a few of you. So think about it this way. The author is using your propensity to simply stay on the surface of the passage to create choices. Okay, that's what the author is doing. So the author is relying on you staying on the surface of the passage when he is creating incorrect choices. Okay, so don't give that to the author. Don't fall in that trap. And if you follow the reading strategies properly, there is no reason why you would stick to the surface of the passage. You will go deep into the passage. Is this point clear, yes or no? For all of you, regardless of whether you selected choice B or not. Good. Okay, can you please clear the meaning of evaluate? Does it mean understanding the argument or specifically comparing pros and cons? Whenever you evaluate, what you're doing is you're presenting the pros and the cons of a concept. So if in this passage the author had presented the positive aspects and the negative aspects of ethnocentrism, then the correct answer choice could have been to evaluate. Okay, you need to bring both the positive and the negative aspects. Okay, so choice B is wrong. Now let's take a look at choice C. Now choice C is a very interesting choice, and about another 20% of you selected choice C. Now this is one of those choices in which the passage says a definition, and here the author is the choice is saying that the purpose of the author in writing this passage is to define the concept of ethnocentrism. So this should be the correct answer. How many of you felt that way when you selected choice C? The passage is about a definition. This choice is about to define the concept, so it should be okay. Now, the trap that you fell in was that you didn't draw the inference about bordering on the extreme. Now, tell me one thing. Would you, in certain cases, in cases such as this one, what you need to do is you need to play the role of the author. Okay, think about any topic and say, if your purpose was to define that topic, would you have used the most exaggerated definition? If the purpose was really to define the concept of ethnocentrism, would you use the exaggerated definition? No, you would not, right? And that's why this choice is wrong. Okay, the correct choice is choice D, in which we are saying to introduce the concept of ethnocentrism. Now, you can definitely introduce the concept by presenting the most exaggerated definition or by presenting an exaggerated definition. You're simply introducing that concept. And by presenting a view on it, the author says that this borders on the extreme, so he is presenting his view on it. So choice D encapsulates the entire essence of this passage. About half of the class selected this choice. Now, let me ask you one thing. For those of you who selected choice D, how many of you rejected the other choices for the reasons that we just talked about? Okay. Now, it's very important that whenever you are selecting the correct choice, it's not only important to select the correct choice for the right reasons, but also to reject the incorrect choices for the right reasons. It's very, very important. So, when you are preparing for RC, make sure that you review the solutions very, very clearly, very, very intently, so that you make sure that your thought process for rejecting each and every answer choice was indeed correct. Okay. Now, I'm going to take up a few questions over here. Neeraj is saying what I thought was this just one definition, so the author is considering other definitions too, hence evaluation. No, but the author is not presenting other definitions, right? The author is not saying that the author is not talking about the other definitions, so there cannot be evaluation, right? The evaluation is always positives and negatives stated in the passage, okay, not assumed. All right. Can you please, okay, I already cleared the meaning of evaluate. I don't understand why B is wrong. B is wrong because there is no evaluation. That's why B is wrong. There is no positives and negatives. I didn't understand how it was an introduction, however. Okay, why it's an introduction is, again, you have to see what is introduction wrong. That's how you have to think about it. No, introduction is not wrong. You can definitely introduce the concept by presenting an exaggerated definition. Right? So introduce, there is no reason why you can reject introduce over here. Right? By presenting a view on it, the author is presenting his view on it by saying that it's exaggerated. Right? So that's why introduction is right. Will the most obvious answer choice generally be a trap? Very well could be, but again, it depends on what's obvious to you. If you are reading the choice, if you're reading the passage really very well, the most obvious answer choice will be a correct answer choice. Okay, but if you are reading the passage not properly, if you're simply skimming through the passage, then you're absolutely right. The most obvious answer choice will generally be a trap. Okay, and that's the beauty. Why am I distinguishing between what the most obvious answer choice is depending upon how you're reading the passage? Because that's what happens. For students who master this process, who are able to read the passage in the right manner, they are able to, for them, answer choices don't appear to be close. Okay, so this is another clue that I want you guys to write down in your scratch pad right now. Okay, if you feel after reading the passage, when you come to the questions, and if you feel that you are that the answer choices appear to be close, that means you have not as yet understood the passage. Go back to the passage. Okay, again, think about utilizing these clues as you are going through the content, as you are solving a question. Okay. Let's take a look at, I rejected E because I didn't understand where the author is presenting his view. Okay, Now you do understand, right? Bordering on the extreme is the view of the author. Would C be correct if it said to define a concept by presenting a view on it? No, it would not be correct, because again, his purpose is not to define the concept. If his purpose were to define the concept, then he would not be, he needs to present a general definition of the concept, if that's what he wants to, if he truly intends to define a concept. Okay. All right. I changed my choice from D to B. Am I overthinking? You are not. I won't say you're overthinking. I would say that you still didn't get the gist of the passage the right way. Okay. When you change your choices, that means you are not confident as to why a particular choice is incorrect. Okay, so again, that's another clue that you haven't understood the passage. Whenever you reject an answer choice, make sure you have a concrete reason, at least one concrete reason for rejecting that answer choice. Okay, so good questions. I believe I read and understood the passage well, but these options are extremely confusing. So Nupur, again, that's a clue that you haven't read and understood the passage well enough. Okay, because these answer choices should not be confusing. Okay, so I have a question, but in option choice D, it doesn't mention anything about further details about in-group, out-group. So does this serve the purpose? Yes, it absolutely does. Okay, think about what the question is. The question is, what is the main purpose of the author? Okay, it's not asking how the author is accomplishing that main purpose. What it's saying is, what is the main purpose? When the author has written down the passage, his intent was to introduce the concept of ethnocentrism by presenting a view on it, and that's an absolutely right purpose. Okay, he doesn't need to be mentioning how he introduced the concept. He doesn't need to be talking about what view he's presenting. Okay. All right, guys. So let's go to the next slide now. Now, what I would say is this was a difficult passage. So if you answered correctly for the right reasons, then great. Keep on applying the reading strategies, but don't worry about the timing. If you made a mistake, but you still was able to understand what was going on in the passage, then these strategies have started to work. Okay, don't give up. If you had no idea what was going on, it's okay. Read slowly. Don't panic. It's just English. Get immersed more and trust the author and trust yourself and pause more often. Okay. All right. I have one more question here. Is it a good idea to read the first question and then go to the passage so that you know what you're looking for? Absolutely not. Okay. I know there are many courses that recommend that, but that's the worst strategy that you can apply. And again, think about this logically. You have the passage is the passage, right? When the author creates, when the test maker creates the questions, he first creates the passage, right? He wants to communicate certain stuff from the passage. Then based on the passage, he comes up with the questions, right? So your understanding of the passage needs to be de-linked from the questions that he's asking, okay? You have to understand the passage regardless of whether the question is a purpose question, regardless of whether you're asked a detailed question, regardless of whether you're asked a structured question. So frankly, this strategy doesn't make any logical sense to me. Okay, so don't do that. In fact, if you do that, you're going to do more harm than good, because now in your mind, as you're reading the passage, you're trying to find the answer to the question, and that's the worst. That's the worst thing that you'll do to your understanding of the passage, because you already are reading the passage with a certain thing in the back of your head, and that's not good at all. Okay. When should I start worrying about timing? How much practice is enough? Should I practice on small paragraphs? I'll talk about that later. Okay. All right. I read at a lot of places that we can skim through the passage and skip reading a few. Does that work? Absolutely not. Okay. And if that were to work, you wouldn't be here. Okay. You can try applying that strategy and try solving questions. Again, keep in mind that you have to be absolutely clear about the strategy that you're learning, because this process is going to take time. It is going to take time for this process to sink in, to become an intuitive process. And if you continue to have doubts about it, then you are not going to learn it. So what I would say is, if you still don't feel convinced that this is the right way to prepare for RC, then be my guest. Do your own, apply your methods that other companies suggest, that you read in other books. Go ahead and do that for a week or so. See if you are understanding. See if your accuracy for difficult questions is improving. If it is, then go ahead. If it is not, then come back to this process and apply it. Give it its due. Do your due diligence in learning the process. Don't have second thoughts about it. Okay, I may sound very harsh right now, but believe me, that is, you need to make a decision. You can't do one and the other. You have to decide what strategy it is that you want to learn. Okay? All right. So let's take up a success story now, okay? And I know that quite a few of you are kind of feeling that, okay, is this strategy right for me or not? So I leave that decision up to you. After all, it's your GMAT attempt, okay? I can tell you all about reading strategies. I can tell you that if you apply them, you'll get closer to your target GMAT score. But again, because a number of you hold these reservations, we include these success stories so that you see what other students have done and you learn from the mistakes that they did. So here's an interview with Nishant. He went from 40 percentile ability in RC to 79 percentile in RC with the confidence that in his last attempt, in which he scored a 740, he would have gotten all RCs correct, which means he would have gotten difficult RCs correct. Okay. Now, when you watch Nishant's interview, what you will see is that Nishant first faltered while applying the strategies. He applied them hurriedly, something that I guarded you against, that these strategies need to be applied slowly. Okay. He would read a passage in 2 minutes and then jump to solving questions. And then he would have to reread the passage to answer the questions, and accordingly he faltered. So despite applying the strategies, he was taking 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes per question. He felt that his understanding of the passage was not sound enough to help him answer the questions, and that is when, after hearing from another successful e-GMATer, he started applying the strategies slowly, something that I've been telling you since the very beginning in this session. Okay. What he learned the hard way was that reading strategies are a means to the end. So there is no point in rushing through the strategies if the end goal of understanding the passage is not being met. Once he changed his mindset and once he gave himself good 4 minutes to read the passage, he was able to answer questions in 30 seconds each. That was the level of his confidence and the power of comprehension. Okay. So the thing that happens is that if you read the passage slowly, what's going to happen is you're going to get that level of understanding of the passage that you will not take time to answer the questions. You'll be able to answer questions really fast because the correct answer choice will be very obvious to you. The incorrect answer choices will be obviously incorrect for you. That's the benefit of reading slowly. So all you're doing is you are simply shifting the time from analyzing the answer choices to reading the passage slowly so that you don't have to spend that amount of time analyzing the answer choices. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Okay. All right. So now let's move on to our next passage. Okay. What are you going to do differently on this passage? Based on our discussion on the first passage, what are you going to do on this passage? Read slowly, pause. Good. Break down each sentence. Absolutely. Now, one more thing that I would recommend for this passage is that as you're reading the passage, think about who is saying what, whose viewpoint is being mentioned. Okay, think about it from that perspective as well. Okay, good. How many of you feel that you can do it, that you can answer, that you can understand this passage well enough? Good, very nice. All right then, let's go ahead. Let's do the same drill. Click on Know Everyone over here. Good, let's get some more people over here. Okay, so here's the passage. We'll do the same drill. I'm going to bring out the notes pane as well. But I'm going to end it right now. All right, enter your notes now, and I'm going to show you the question. All right, last few seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So I have a question. Do we have multiple answer choices in the GMAT? No, you don't. Again, this question has been created with a certain intent. So that's the reason why we had multiple choice answers, so that we can give you a lot more feedback here. So good question. All right. Now, before I go into the passage, let's go through this short sentence. Read what the author is saying and then tell me what can you infer from the statement. The color blue is considered to have a soothing effect on the moods of people. What can you infer from this statement? Okay, let's get a few more responses. All right. So I have an almost 50-50 split between sentences 1 and 2. Okay. Now let me ask you this. When the author says that color blue is considered to have a soothing effect on moods of people, would you think that the color blue is always soothing? Yes or no? No, you cannot say that. And that's the reason why the second statement cannot be inferred. Okay, the color blue is not soothing. It's simply saying that some people regard color blue as soothing. Okay, it's not a sure short thing that for everyone the color blue is soothing. Okay, so the correct answer here is that some people regard blue as a soothing color. Okay, is this point clear? When you have something which says considered to have a soothing effect, you cannot say that for a fact blue is a soothing color. All right. Now let's go into the passage. First of all, how was this passage? What did you think about this passage from the standpoint of applying reading strategies? Complex wording, complicated, easy, not bad, okay. All right. What strategy were you able to apply? Pausing and collecting information helped, good. Abbreviate, read slowly, very nice. Okay. Now, one more thing that I would ask is, were you able to understand who's saying what? Yes or no? Were you able to pay attention to who is saying what? Okay, good. Because this is another thing which you need to focus on. As you are reading the passage, you need to see whose viewpoint is being talked about. Okay, so let's start this. Ethnocentrism, EC, and its canonical variants and some of its variants are deemed to be intimately connected with xenophobia. So I'm going to pause here. A complex attitude, blah blah, right? So what the author is saying is that EC and its variations are considered to be closely connected with xenophobia. Now, is it a fact that EC and its variants are closely connected? Can you say that as a fact? No. Now, some people, what this means is, this sentence means that some people think that EC and its variants are closely connected with xenophobia. Okay, what is xenophobia? Xenophobia, let's shorten it up as XP. Okay, now my next question to you is, till this point, do you know what the author thinks about connection between EC and XP? No, we don't know what the author thinks. The author is simply saying that some people think that EC and XP are closely connected. He's simply reporting that information. He has not said whether he believes that or not. Okay? Again, very, very important distinction. Let's read further. A complex attitude system cum sentiment structure involving aversion / dislike and antagonism vis-a-vis the strange or the alien and everything that the stranger or the alien represents. Oh my goodness. Such a long definition. Okay. And very complicated wording, right? But let's sift through it. Now, when you read a certain section which appears to just go on and on, okay, get through the point and then just pause and reread it with a mindset that you're going to simplify it. It's okay to reread portions of passage in this manner. Okay. What's not okay is that you read through the entire passage, then you come to the question and then you read through the passage again to understand the passage. That's not right. But when you read through the sentence like this, the way I read, and you felt that, okay, I don't understand what the author is saying, just pause, take a deep breath and come back to that part of the passage and read slowly with an intention to simplify as you're reading along. Look at how I'm going to do it now. A complex attitude system cum sentiment structure. So it's some kind of structure involving aversion or dislike, some kind of structure in which there is hatred and antagonism. So hatred towards the strange vis-a-vis the strange or the alien, involving hatred towards the alien and everything that the stranger or the alien represents. So all of this is exactly the same thing. So all this is saying is, what is xenophobia? Xenophobia is some kind of structure that involves hatred towards strangers. That's it. How many of you were able to simplify or summarize this long definition in this manner? Good, very nice. And that's a very, very important skill. That's a skill of summarizing. Okay. Now, what you read just now is definition of XP. Now, is this definition a fact? Yes or no? Absolutely, yes. This definition is a fact. Now, do you think that the author agrees with this definition? Yes or no? Yes, the author always agrees with facts. Okay. It's a fact, which means everyone in the world agrees with it. Okay, everyone logical in the world agrees with it. Okay, because it's a fact. Now let's read further. Some socio-cultural anthropologists even considered XP and EC opposite sides of the same coin. I'm going to pause here and let's read through this. Some socio-cultural anthropologists, so now we are talking about some experts, even considered XP and EC opposite sides of the same coin. So now remember what the author said up front. He said that EC and XP are considered, some people think that EC and XP are closely connected. Okay, then he explained what XP is. XP is a system in which there is hatred towards aliens or strangers. Okay, now he's saying there are some people, some experts, who even considered XP and EC opposite sides of the same coin. What does opposite sides of the same coin mean? What does opposite sides of the same coin mean? A little bit more. Again, think about it from the standpoint of the passage. Coexist with a difference. Absolutely right. Connected but opposite. Coexist. Absolutely right. Okay, so what this is saying is that yes, there are some people who think that EC and XP are closely connected, but there are some people who think that they are not just closely connected, they coexist. Opposite sides of the same coin are always together, right? Now, do you guys see the intent behind using the word even? Why has the author used the word even here? Tell me. Why has the author used the word even? Further the view, intensify the relationship. Absolutely right. Which view is he furthering? Already one consideration is presented. Absolutely right. So the author initially said this part over here, that there are some people who think that these two are closely connected. So now he's taking another group of people, or a small group of people who believe that they're intimately connected, but who actually take it even further to say that these two things are always coexisting. Okay, so that's why it's to emphasize on the intimate connection. Okay, but a few voices have cautioned. Now but is present, which means there is a contrast. But some people have cautioned that this need not be the case. What need not be the case? What does this refer to in this case? That they are not the same, that they are not opposite sides of the same coin. Absolutely, that EC and XP coexist. Absolutely right. Now tell me one thing. Where do you think the author lies in terms of these two assertions here? Some sources even consider that they are opposite sides of the same coin. Do you think that the author also believes in this? Yes or no? Do you think that the author believes in this? Now, the correct answer here is we don't know. Okay, sorry, the answer, I don't have that as an option choice, but really over here we don't know. We don't know what the author believes in. Okay, likewise, but a few voices have cautioned that this need not be the case. Do we know whether the author agrees with this or not? He doesn't have an opinion, or he hasn't presented his opinion in this passage here. Okay, now let's take a look at the inference aspect. The question that was asked to us was, what all can be inferred? Okay, a correct inference, and this is something that I want you to make a note of. A correct inference is always from the point of view of the author. Whenever you have an inference question, that's always translate that question into what does the author believe in. Okay, whenever you see an inference question. Now, as soon as you translate that question into what does the author believe in, you will always then keep in mind where the author, on what part the author has presented his opinion. The correct inference cannot be something on which the author has not given any opinion. And the author agrees with the facts, so a fact from the passage can very well be a correct inference. Okay, so now let's take a look at the answer choices. What was the first choice? And I'm going to bring back the poll here. The first choice was xenophobia and EC are different facets of the same concept. No, you can't. The author has not presented any view on this part. When you say different facets of the same concept, opposite sides of the same coin, the author has not presented his opinion, so this cannot be inferred. Okay. Xenophobia entails dislike towards the strange. This is the very definition, so the author agrees with this. Then XP and EC are not connected with each other. There is nothing. This is the last one over here. The author has not presented his opinion, so C is not correct. D, canonical variants of EC are closely connected with xenophobia. Almost everyone selected choice D. Again, this is not something that the author has given his opinion on. He said these are deemed to be intimately connected. So choice D is not the correct inference. Choice E, in some cases, XP could be the cause of ethnocentrism. There is no causal relationship presented in the passage whatsoever. Okay. Any doubts about the inference question here? Yes, put in your doubts here. No doubts? That is good. Is the author's perspective always explicitly stated? Well, I don't understand what you mean by that. Okay. Again, as you're reading the passage, you always have to make a note of who's saying what. Okay. When you read terms such as some people, right, and you don't see any effort made by the author in stating whether he agrees with that or he disagrees with that, then you know that the author has not presented his opinion. Okay. Now, for example, let's say if the author said here, some socio-cultural anthropologists even considered XP and EC opposite sides of the same coin, and rightly so, then in that case, you would have seen that the author has given his opinion. Okay, so again, you have to watch out for when the author gives opinions about a certain point. Okay, or when he's in simply a reporting mode. So a very good way to analyze a passage is from the standpoint of, your news anchors. At times, your news anchors are simply reporting information. They are simply reporting things that are happening, right? But at times there are those news analysts who are giving their own analysis of the stuff that's going on, right? So again, think about when the author is in that reporting mode wherein he's simply stating things, right, stating opinions of other people, but is disengaged from those opinions because he's not saying whether he agrees or disagrees. Okay, or when the author is actually in that analysis mode wherein he's presenting other people's opinion and then he's commenting on them. Okay, so it's a very useful tool to analyze, to look at the passage from that perspective. Okay, are deemed to be could mean given. No, are deemed to are deemed to be means are considered to be intimately connected. Okay, all right, what about B? Okay, let's take a look at B here. Entails dislike towards a strange. This is correct. B is an inference. This is simply the definition, the summary of the definition. Okay, can you explain a bit more why D is not the answer? I think I've already gone through that. Are closely connected. Again, this is the main thing that we discussed in this passage. This is not a fact. This is a deemed view. Only some people think that they are intimately connected. Okay, all right. Now, if there's any other doubt, please go through the recording and I'm going to be sharing the PDF with you, so you'll have the details of the PDF as well, details of this solution as well. So let's come back to the process here. Again, I want to make sure that you all trust the process. If you feel that this, again, as I mentioned earlier, you need to have complete trust in the process before you can embark on the journey to master this process. So if you still have your doubts about it, I would say try out other processes. You will know within 3 to 4 days whether those processes are working for you or not. But again, keep in mind the goal. The goal is to solve difficult questions correctly for you to get to that 90 percentile ability in RC. Okay, so those other processes will very well work on easy passages, because again, passages are easy. You don't require that level of analysis for those passages. But see if those other processes work on difficult passages that you are going to see if you do aim to get to that 740, that 750 score. Okay. Now, I'm going to skip through some of these slides in which we talk about the timing on GMAT on GMAT RC, and I'm going to talk about this as a typical process that a number of you follow. So what happens is you read the passage quickly. In about two minutes, you read the passage. Okay, you take a look at question number 1, you read choice A, then you go back to the passage. You read choice B, then you go back to the passage. You read choice C, you go back to the passage. In all of this back and forth, you end up taking 1.5 to 2 minutes to solve a question. And then you repeat this process for question number 2. How many of you have followed this kind of a flow of your time? Almost all of you. Okay, so ultimately you end up taking anywhere from 6.5 to 8 minutes per passage, and you are actually frustrated because of all this rereading. You actually get into the mode of self-doubt because you feel that you're not getting it. There's a lot of frustration that kicks in, something that's not a feeling, that's not something which you want when you're taking an exam like GMAT. Okay, all right, now think about it. How is it that you should be solving RC? you should be reading the passage slowly, which means take anywhere from 2.5 to 4 minutes to read the passage slowly. Now, when you do read the passage slowly and the outcome is that you understand everything that the author has said in the passage, when you come to questions, you won't find answer choices confusing. You won't find answer choices close. You will be able to confidently reject incorrect answer choices. You'll be able to select the correct answer choice in a minute at the most. Okay, and that's the beauty of applying the process slowly, of reading the passage slowly. Okay, the total time that you take would actually come down. Okay, and you'll have that level of confidence that you can do well, that you are understanding things. All right. So the key to success is understanding the passage in the first go before you even take a look at any of the questions and the answer choices. And to do that, you need to read slowly. You need to apply the reading strategy slowly. Okay. All right. Now, this is a comeback story of a student who was unable to do well because of RC and eventually was able to ace the GMAT because she mastered GMAT RC. In her first attempt, she bombed RC. I would come across an RC in the middle of my mocks and I would feel low and I would lose time and thereby end up rushing through SC and CR questions as well. In fact, she messed up her CR and SC because of RC. Then she changed her attitude towards RC. She decided to get immersed in the passage, and as she got immersed, she found comprehending easier. She was able to take good notes and get more and more questions right. This strategy, while time-consuming in the learning phase, helped her improve her verbal score to V41, that's 94 percentile on GMAT verbal. Okay, so again, while you are learning this strategy, it will be time-consuming. In fact, this is exactly what Arjun did. He took GMAT 3 times and he just could not improve. He did everything that he could. RC was his pain point. In his final attempt, he applied the reading strategies and he didn't do anything very different from what we did in this webinar. He applied the reading strategies and he focused on gaining complete comprehension. Okay, he stayed calm, he focused on learning. And this is not me as an instructor telling you, this is a student who has toiled through the process. I would really urge you all to go through his video debrief. In fact, look at all the links that we have shared with you, that we will share with you in this PDF. Okay. What was the result here? He scored V41 in his final attempt. He went from 40 percentile in verbal to V41. That's 91 percentile in his fourth attempt. So that's the magic that's possible, but there are no tricks. What you need to do is work diligently. You need to toil through it. Now let me give you the study plan for improving. The first thing that you need to do is you need to improve your comprehension. Then you need to learn how do you answer questions correctly based on the understanding of the passage that you've gained. And then you need to practice in the right manner. Okay. So for improving comprehension, we have these dedicated skill building courses. The first one is Master Comprehension course, in which we teach you how is it that you should be reading a sentence. Remember, we talked about understanding sentence structure as the first reading strategy. That is the strategy that we teach you in Master Comprehension course. We teach you how long sentences are formed. How is it that you should be reading long sentences to understand the meaning. Okay. After you go through this course, we then teach you reading strategies, the strategies that I talked about briefly in this webinar. You have 3 different concept files, 30 minutes each, in which you go through, you learn these reading strategies, you apply these reading strategies on 3 practice files then. Okay. So total of 8 passages with the rigorous application of reading strategies. Okay. That's when you develop an understanding of how is it that you should be reading. Then you have these specialized concepts in which we teach you each and every question type. So each question type is first taught in the concept files. So for main point, you have 2 concept files. Then we make you practice, apply those concepts on practice files 1 and 2. Then we do the same drill for inference. The stuff that I taught you on one slide regarding inference, all of that and a lot more has been covered in concepts 1, 2, and 3, in which we give you a very, very focused amount of practice. How do you apply that? And then you practice those skills on your own on practice files 1 and 2. The same thing is done for detailed questions and for structured questions. Now, once you have built the understanding of what each and every question types tests you on and what are the different pitfalls in the answer choices, now you need to practice all of that using dedicated practice files. For this, we have 4 application files in the course and a total of 10 ability quizzes in Scholaranium. So overall, you get about more than 45 RC passages with uniform coverage across all the genres that are tested on the GMAT. Okay. And here's another recent example of a student who made this a habit. Okay, Anastasia is another person who took GMAT 3 times. She took private tutor the second time in Moscow. Now, she took master comprehension course to heart, and successful students do that. They build their foundation skills. Now, she was not able to improve after her second attempt, even after taking private tutoring, but once she took master comprehension course to heart, she was able to succeed because she built her foundation skills. She learned how to understand the meaning. She also made sure, as Arjun did, to read the passage only once, and that's the power of reading the passage really, really well. Time to answer questions comes down since you are so clear about what the author is saying. Okay, Arjun used to read the passage for 4 minutes and be able to answer questions in under 30 seconds. She used to take 3 minutes to read the passage and then be able to answer questions correctly in 45 seconds each. Okay. So I'm going to leave you with this slide here. On the GMAT, speeding kills. Okay. If you keep this thing in mind, you will be able to master RC. All right, so with this we have come to the end of this session here, and I would like to understand from you as I share the PDF with you. I'd like for you to tell me what is it that you liked in this session, and so that we make sure that we continue doing the good things that we are doing in this session. And please give me your constructive feedback as well, so that I can incorporate that as well in my next session. All right, and then I am going to invite Rajat back into the session so that he can take any other questions that you may have. And in the meanwhile, I'm going to be sharing the PDF of this session with you. Okay, while I invite Rajat back into the session, you can please put your questions in the Q&A pod. And I absolutely appreciate your positive comments over here. It really makes my morning when I can see that that you all get exactly what I tried to communicate. Okay, so Anshrif says, great session and strategies. Thank you, Anshrif. However, during my practice, I'm able to deal with easy and medium passages because I can get the gist of the passage, but difficult ones drive me crazy. Any tips on that, please? Frankly, the entire session was for that, Anshrif. So, as I said, you would be able to answer easy and medium questions because those are not that complicated. But for you to be able to do well on difficult passages, you have to master this strategy here. You need to learn how to read properly. Okay, so go through the master comprehension course, follow along the RC course, follow the study plan that I have just shared with you, and you should be able to do well. While reading the passage, when I start to understand the passage, I tend to forget the to apply the prediction step of understanding the passage? Is it necessary to predict even if we are in the flow? Good question, Aniket. Again, prediction is done. Prediction using hinging on the keywords is done so that you can prepare yourself for what you're going to read next. So if you feel that maybe you're doing it intuitively already, so that's okay. You don't need to stop just because there's that step to predict. But if you feel that you're not able to understand what the author is saying, then definitely start to pause more often to predict. Again, the thing to keep in mind is as you're learning these strategies, as you start to master the process, all of this will become intuitive such that you won't have to stop and then do something and then stop and do something. It will all become an intuitive process, right? So that's the goal. So maybe that's what is already happening with you, Aniket. Okay, I feel similar approach can be applied for all questions of verbal section. Absolutely, yes, Suraj. All of our strategies are based on this very principle that you need to understand the logic aspect of you need to understand what the author is communicating. That same thing happens with SC, that you need to understand the meaning. The same thing happens with CR, wherein you need to understand the logic behind the CR passage. Okay. So, all right, with this, I'm going to leave you all with Rajat, and Rajat is going to take care of any other questions that you may have. And good luck. Let us know how we can help you in getting to your GMAT goal.
All right, guys, let me just make sure we have the right microphone. Yes, we do. Let me just bring in the files once again. As the batch calendar, remember the batch starting next week. So if you're looking for a live course, I'd recommend joining about 4 days in advance at a bare minimum. Here's the session PDF. Above reading strategies for CR questions, yes, you can. But the only thing which is there is CR questions have arguments. Arguments require inference information in a slightly more modified manner, where you know what's a conclusion, you know what's a claim within an argument, and so on and so forth. So as you're in the CR session, you're going to really see that. So it's going to be a refinement of the approach that you see over here, but again, the key principles do not change. Anshrif says, I understand your point, but sometimes I'm not able to understand the passage because I'm not familiar with the content. Anshrif, the beauty of reading strategies is that you don't need to be familiar with the content. And once you start applying these strategies on a few passages, you'd be able to really see that. Now with the GMAT RC course, you get exposed to over 100 passages. And in those passages, actually, it's about 140 odd RC passages or so throughout the course. And you'd be able to see pretty much passages of every type over there. How many RCs do you see on a test? Probably 4. Aniket says some sentences are very difficult to comprehend while the rest of the passage is straightforward. Should we skip such sentences or spend some time on it? So Aniket, the sentences that are difficult to comprehend, you've got to modulate your reading for those sentences and understand the intent that the author has had while writing those sentences. As long as you understand that, you don't need to remember all the details with those sentences and you know. So just make sure you understand the intent. If in a GMAT RC passage, if a sentence is there, it's written with an intent. So step 1, modulate your reading speed. Read it down, read the sentence in chunk. And step 2, if there are details over there, you may just skip over details, but understand the intent. Shivangi says, I hope I'm able to apply these strategies in complex science passages. Yes, you will be able to, Shivangi. Again, remember, when you find a passage type overall that's a bit more difficult for you, what I recommend doing is making sure that you read extra slowly, especially in the very beginning. Remember, there's a practice stage where you're learning how to apply them. There's a testing stage. The mistake that people do is that they mix the practice and the testing stage. They think while they're practicing, they have to be in the test mode. No, that is, as I mentioned earlier in the passage, that's like going to a race course to learn how to drive. That's actually a recipe for destruction. Anshrif says, I'll try applying the strategy. Where can I find the Master Comprehension course? Anshiv, under the verbal menu, you're going to find the Master Comprehension course. It's a part of our verbal and GMAT packages that we sell. It's not a part of the free trial. We are a for-profit company. We do offer a lot